some questions and answers. So those questions and answers can relate to any of the presentations you've seen today, but also for existing customers, if you've got some questions on the product. Katie Evans from Thermo is here, product manager, to support me in answering those. In fact, she would be answering them. So what I want to talk about here, just to wrap it up, is you've seen the technology, the tools, and really, I think Damien has given us context today with a great presentation, which is what's the result of that in terms of the business. And so I'm probably covering a little bit of ground that he has done, trying to bring it together for you in terms of the tools we have that can support you in delivering a paperless or lean lab. So, you know, back to maybe the early presentation this morning where we started, what are your goals? I mean, you heard Damien on compliance, Sample Manager is very strong. It still is a key part of why customers use it. Increasing productivity in the lab, and that's really giving the lab time, giving them back time so analysts can do more useful things than processing data. And then reducing costs, so in a lot of ways, both in the lab itself in terms of saving on the processing of what was paper, but also in centralizing our systems now, even the software costs and the maintenance costs can be reduced. Our strategy is very much based on connects. So you've seen Integration Manager this afternoon, and it operates at the instrument level and it operates at the system level. And that's what we wanted to get across to you today. Of course, it is Sample Manager's way of connecting to the outside world, but it provides a very comprehensive integration strategy, including the process, because you'll see MES there. So we have an agent, an OPC agent that works with Integration Manager. So if you're in the process industries, you can have your process system log a sample in and get the result written back to your historian. We're very keen on our customers that are using LIMS and chromatography data systems, whether it's Chameleon or Empower, which tend to be one or the other. There's an element with Agilent as well, obviously, in that type of integration. Generally speaking, when we see chromatography in a lab, probably about 60% of the data that's been generated is coming from those systems. And this screen gives you an idea, most of you know, but you've got a standalone LIMS and a standalone CDS. You're going to have quite a number of processes in between them. And we reckon you're certainly going to have about 8 manual processes there on the bottom line there. And integrating between the two of them bidirectionally is a real time saver. And I've certainly seen factors of 3, 4 to 1. In this example here, the manual steps are reduced from 8 down to 1. So it is a big time saver, and there are some customers here who have them integrated who can speak to that. So it's a bidirectional integration where you're sending the run sequence file to LIMS, or from LIMS to the chromatography data system, taking back the peak result that you want into LIMS, but also being able to view the full chromatogram from LIMS. So I'm not going to give too many plugs this afternoon, so this is one of them. We believe as vendors we are offering you, the customer, a fully complete platform, but we can offer CDS with Sample Manager, with Chameleon, and there is now a standard out-of-the-box, no extra cost interface to Chameleon. The LES is a big development for us, as you've seen the potential of it, I hope today, for method execution in the lab. The real benefits of it are compliance and traceability. It's also fully web-based, so that's one part of Sample Manager that's completely web-based. So coming back to the slide I showed you this morning, and again, those of you that have business systems in your lab as well as LIMS, again, we'd encourage you to think in terms of integrating the ERP to Sample Manager. The ones we have done are obviously SAP to Sample Manager and JD Edwards to Sample Manager. So the beauty of it is your raw materials are logged in, when they arrive, they're tested, they go through, and then at the far end you can, give a disposition to a finished product lot and write it back to the ERP. But in between we have these various nodal points on the workflow, and I just want to talk this afternoon about what we have to offer at each of those points that can help you automate your lab. So I've picked these topics, and I walk through them one by one, starting with sample receipt. So the big part of sample receipt is generating the labels, and from Sample Manager 10 on, we have a point and click label writer. Prior to that, we had to use code. So we can generate lots of different types of barcode labels. And also, we have the use of folders, and our customers find folders very useful where they can partition the work in the lab as it's coming in automatically for analysts to work on. There's the whole area of workload management. Resource Manager here is an Orbis module, but it operates with Sample Manager. Damien gave me a good example of it this morning with the T-card system. But it is a tool for scheduling work in the lab, and the current release, version 3, actually has capacity management. So we can look at a whole window of work that's being scheduled and determine how much capacity is being used in the lab from the analyst side and from the instrument side, or look at it the other way, how much free capacity do we have if we want to put more samples to the lab. And Resource Manager hits off a number of key areas in Sample Manager. It'll hit off the operator approval table to make sure that the operator is qualified to do a test. It'll hit off the stocks table to make sure we have stocks that are in use, they're not expired, and we have sufficient quantities. And it'll hit off the instrument table to make sure that when we're assigning an instrument to an analyst for a test, that instrument is in calibration and in service. On the preparation side, we've a very simple example here. You can use the LES without too much automation or integration, none in fact, just to write out your preparation methods. And you can make sure that the steps are followed. You can follow the button code there on the left. And as you go through, the colors will change as you work through the procedure for your preparation. We've also on the preparation side, the stocks table I mentioned, where you can see the quantities of stocks you have available graphically. And in working with chromatography, whether it's Waters or Chromeleon, it's bidirectional, so part of that preparation is the run sequence file is prepared on LIMS with the controls and sent to the chromatography data system. On the wider integration side, on the instrument side, we categorize our instruments we categorize our integration at 3 levels. Level 1 we treat as balances, pH meters, the simple instruments. They can be connected directly, unidirectionally to Sample Manager without Integration Manager. We can use Integration Manager as well. Level 2 are the file-based ones, and Liam showed you some of those today where you transform data. And level 3 are system to system. So you saw an example of a third-party stability system integrated to Sample Manager today. But we can integrate to a whole range of instruments using Integration Manager, which brings us back to our Connect strategy. On the result review side, some very obvious ones for you, for those of you who are LIMS users, of course, automatic calculations. I mean, those who don't have LIMS, when you go into a lab and you see calculators being used, or even if you have LIMS and you see calculators being used, they shouldn't be used. Those calculations should be on the LIMS. In terms of stored specs, just those of you who are using SMIDI, which is the interface to SAP, the current release now downloads master data from SAP to LIMS. So the specifications can be downloaded from SAP to Sample Manager. And again, that's an example of centralizing master data. And combining results from different systems. Obviously, we talked a lot today about chromatography systems. But I think the important thing is that in one system, through integration, you see all the data. So on a result review, what you really want is the reviewer to be able to see the results that are on the assertive analysis, but have the ability to go beyond that and maybe look at the full GC that was part of that, look at the instrument history that was part of that, look at stock history that was part of that. So you can do that in Sample Manager, and how you configure that is the trick to make that easy and efficient. And the alternative of not doing that is to have people, and I've seen it, reviewing on the screen and then going to the lab to check a logbook. That's what you don't want. Workflows, we talked a lot about workflows in terms of analytic data today, but workflows apply to any part of that electronic backbone I referred to earlier. So you can configure specific review rules with workflows in Sample Manager. So if you have an out of spec for a particular result, you can have a particular business rule that you can initiate at that point. And the result review part is one of the big time savers in the legal lab. Data manager, data management. We're only looking, I think, with LIMS at a fraction of the data that's in the laboratory. You think of all the instruments that are in there, range of instruments, the amount of data that they generate. Some labs you go into, they're still printing paper, filing it. Some of them are storing them as electronic files. But one of the key questions is, can you retrieve that raw data easily? Can you retrieve that data into your LIMS at a time of review? If an auditor comes, can you pull that data pretty quickly and take it to the boardroom or whatever is part of the review? So data management is that extra dimension beyond just the integration we do. The integration we do is very much to take a result from an instrument as part of the workflow, to move to the next step of the workflow. But data management looks at all the surrounding information, the controls that were used in that instrument run, and all of the raw data, and having that centralized on the LIMS. And that's the power of it. And the strength we have is that we are able to offer you, Sample Manager users and Nautilus users, data management with the LIMS. So Data Manager is provided with both LIMS. Okay, so what it does effectively is it takes the data from the instrument and converts it into XML, or Gamma we call it, General Analytic Markup Language, for storing in XML files. So it means that you have independently stored the data from the originating instrument, and you're storing it with controls so that you can graph that data and query that data. So it's not just archiving it for the sake of archiving it. You're actually taking that data to use it and graph it later and query it. So a very simple example is if you take a sample here in Sample Manager, we run a query, it'll fire off Data Manager, and you'll see the full chromatogram, the raw data. Now that's not a viewer, that's actually off the archive. So the benefits, rapidly accessing data, storing your data to 21 CFR 11 standards so that it's independent of the instrument. And I know there was a question earlier about historical data. I think it was Sean, was it from Data Manager is one of the ways of taking historical data. If you're retiring an instrument or retiring a chromatography system, one of the ways of saving that data is to archive it to a Data Manager. And then it's ease of use for recovering data information. Okay, we spend all this money. I mean, one of the things we do in the lab is we generate a lot of data. And the real question is, do we get payback for all that data? And as a vendor, I'd have to say, no, we still don't. I mean, people here would say they're not getting enough information from LIMS. And that's something we have to work on. But some of the tools, certainly Data Manager is an example, where you're centralizing that amount of data and able to put it in one query is a step forward. But we want to make the data that we've taken so long to capture through configuration or design and configuration, we want to actually use that data to do things that give us a payback in the lab. One of the strengths of Sample Manager 10, 11 are forms. So, there's a lot of inbuilt graphing opportunities with the product now with forms. And you can be trained to develop these forms. And I use the word develop advisedly. It's not develop, it's configure. You've also seen the environmental monitoring with the room diagrams or maps. You can have, these graphs can be active so that from a point on the graph, you can find the sample and then the sample history. You go off and look at all the tests, how they were tested. So the graph can lead to a whole story about a sample. We can implement logic. So in a form, like I've just shown you there with the graph, we can put a workflow behind that form so that if there's a result outside a spec, the business logic can be configured now. Prior to 11, we would have to use code for that. With 11, we can use the workflow. So at the end of the cycle, if you like, when you've processed the results and you want to make the results work for you, we have a lot more power now with 11 than we had prior to this. Okay. Sharing information. First stage in sharing is between systems. So we've ERP, process-based systems, chromatography systems, data management systems. We can connect to them all. But in Sample Manager itself, what's there? There's a report designer, there are dashboards, there's still Infomaker, there's a new SQC module being released, and there's use of folders. I think most of our customers that have had the opportunity of using folders would say it has saved them having reports, unnecessary reports. So here's an example of some forms in Sample Manager for KPIs in the lab. There's an example there, looking at how many samples do we have on time. So a nice idea is if you've implemented a lean lab using Sample Manager, you should measure a lean lab using Sample Manager and use some forms to do it. Okay, to look at your sample turnaround times, your test turnaround times, your sample throughput. SQC has been around a long time, so it's had a considerable refresh. But for those of you who haven't used it, it works. Damon gave a good example of it this morning. But it uses Short, so it provides individual, moving range, standard deviation, process capability charts. Embedded in Sample Manager is the new report designer. So it's like Infomaker. It's probably more intuitive than Infomaker for doing reports that you want to pull. With the forms, you go onto a form and it automatically updates itself, so it's more proactive. A report is something that is interactive. There's an example of some of the tools. The other one we saw this morning is the portal. So the whole idea of getting information into production as soon as results are approved in the lab, to us that's fundamental to a LIMS system or an informatics system paying back. Because how much does that save an organization if they get a result that's out of spec in time while they're manufacturing something? There's a lot of money. So in summary, we've looked at Lean Lab for a number of our customers, and we believe through the product suite we now have and the implementation of Lean Lab, we can reduce the costs of running your lab. It is an investment. It's an investment of time and an investment of money. You won't get a Lean Lab just by implementing Sample Manager or any other LIMS. I think it's fair to say that a lot of the labs we've worked with, they've had Lean projects prior to it as a prerequisite to actually the LIMS. So the two go hand in glove. The process harmonization and the process lean out go hand in glove. But ultimately, you will save cost in terms of the processing of data. the whole paper handling, you know, each paper, as Damon said, has a life of its own. You avoid that. Improving productivity in the lab. I think it's very important to explain this in the context of giving the lab back time. And I know I'm looking at one lab at the moment, and I'm able to see at different points in the lab where we've saved 2 and 3 to 1 in time, but I'm not clear yet how we turn that into an overall improvement in turnaround time in the lab, and we're working with the customer on that. But there's definite productivity improvements of 20% or thereabouts through more automation in the lab. And finally, compliance. The full gamut of compliance, from the audit trail through to traceability of the instrument parts that you've used, stocks, every step that's been done. I mean, you saw the LES today, so if you're using the LES, every step that an analyst has taken at the start of the test to conclusion of the test is traceable. That's a lot of data. And if auditors are satisfied with what we currently have without LES, I think they would be very pleased with what we have with LES. So that concludes my talk.